Hi there, this is Frits Rinker. I would like to just introduce a couple of concepts that I made up in my robo-economic philosophy, which is about trying to convert the current economy, the world economy, into a much smarter and safer and healthier alternative. If you want to know more about it, you can read the PDF on my profile, and I'll be including this story in it. Shortly, I will be elaborating a little bit. I made it 10 pages, so it's easy to read. And the key message is that fossil fuels are basically almost like a high pressure thing that is pushing us to destroy the world. And if we can remove fossil fuels and replace them with renewables, then the pressure becomes way lower. The competitive, etc., all the processes in the world economy change, so that we can think clearer and be more focused on surviving and existential priorities that we have, which the economy just hasn't. It doesn't care about human lives at all. And that's a scary thing to realize if you realize, okay, there's in the profit motive of banks and companies, there is just no room for humans at all. So it is basically a genocidal economy that we are in at the moment, and it's very prudent, I think, to change that. But so the fossil economy, which we are in right now, where fossil fuels are freely traded and used, and our currency basically represents fossil fuels. So the only reason why the dollar is valuable is that you can buy fossil fuels with them, because how would a manufacturer somewhere produce anything if he did not get paid in a currency that allows him to manufacture whatever he's making again? So to do that, he needs to have fossil fuels so that he can pay the let's say the cab, or let's say the lorry driver to supply the goods, and the mine equipment has to be fueled with fossil fuels, and whatever the plane that flies the parts over has to be fueled with kerosene. It's a fossil fuel, and etc. And of course, all the workers in the factory have gas appliances in their home, or they pay for electricity, which is made by gas and coal. And so the currency needs to be a fossil fuel buying currency. And if oil producing countries would suddenly refuse to accept dollars, for instance, then of course the value of the dollar would collapse, and a lot of products like the ones that are produced in Asia basically could not be bought with dollars anymore. That would just simply be shut down. There's a lot of people talking about that, but this is it's very important concept to understand, that because there's so much fossil fuel, there's pressure behind it to use it. They want to sell it, and of course banks, being the intermediaries in this process, are helping out as much as they can, and they are having a good time because they can simply create money, and then that money buys fossil fuels. So banks have a control over almost all resources in the world at the moment in the world economy. Basically, if they create $1 billion in New York, because, or like what you saw with the line in Saudi Arabia, this project of building a huge city of like a very slim line of building through the desert, that was initiated and let's say thought up, imagined by people that just thought, okay, well, we have the oil, we can make everything, we don't have to, let's say we have infinite resources with the oil, and then if only we create the money to buy the oil, which is a matter of typing it in a terminal, then of course we can trade with ourselves and we can do this project. It's a good thing that the leader of Saudi Arabia realized that this might not be a good idea after all. But long story short, banks are heavily dependent on fossil fuels for their existence. And that is why I complain about the fossil economy and economism all the time, because it leads to infinite waste, incredible waste, and of course incredible damage to our climate. The alternative is the robo-economy, where you say, okay, all the energy that we use have to come from renewable resources, so renewable sources only. So even if we, and that changes the economy entirely, because suddenly you just can't build something if you don't have the energy, if you don't have the renewable energy. So you can have, let's say, all the renewable energy on an island, if you like to restrict it for the purpose of explanation. there's an island, it has wind turbines, and the wind turbines provide energy for whatever happens on the island. Well, if you do want to do something new on the island, you need more energy, and so you need first a new energy source. And in the fossil economy, you can just say, well, okay, now we ship more fossil fuels to that island, and then they have to compete with the products with other regions for that fossil fuels. But for those fossil fuels, but in the robo economy, you just simply have to say, okay, first we have to build a wind turbine, and even to build a wind turbine, we have to get the energy somewhere. Of course, in the beginning, you can first of all cheat a little bit and say, okay, we are now going to reserve a fixed percentage of all the fossil resources to make renewable resources so that we have enough of them. And then in the end, you will have too much. And we already are seeing that the solar panels producing way too much energy during the day, and they cannot even be transported through the grid, because the grid is an outdated concept system that was meant to centralize energy production and distribution so that banks could ensure that they would keep, let's say, having cash flow from it. But so there can be too much energy, renewable energy, and then you just use batteries to store it. And then with the Cybertrucks and future energy trucks, probably you'll get moving battery systems that just move quite enormous amounts of energy from one place to the other if there's no cables. And that will all solve itself, and it will all power itself, and the recycling of batteries will make them better, and the mining will become electric. It's already doing that, and so it seems like a challenge, and it seems like, especially if you are reasoning from the fossil economy, everything is very expensive, and that's also has been exaggerated a lot in history. Wind turbines, like the banks and the fossil industry like to make the renewable future as expensive as possible, so that the least amount of money, relatively percentage-wise, is flowing into the renewable future, because that's the end of fossil and that's the end of banks as we know them. I mean, the whole hydrogen thing is just a way to waste as much renewable energy, as much money that wants to go into renewable energy on something that will not work. And of course, we have seen several electrical car companies that absorbed billions of dollars over decades and achieved nothing. That's just banks fucking with the renewable future and with the robo economy. But that's the robo economy. That's basically where we would feel most at home, where we have a place to live and a supermarket and cars to drive around and planes to fly, etc. That would be nice. What I kind of realized when I was in Asia recently is that we're so insecure with this fossil fuel economy at the moment, which has intensive farming at its base, and supermarkets and stuff like that. And that if you go to the lower income countries, which basically means that banks have addicted people to fossil fuels less. So we call them the poor countries because they don't have a lot of money. But you have to look at the existential security of the people. And that can, of course, be bad in case of wars. And then you wonder who funds the wars. Well, of course, it is banks. So, but these regions where I've traveled around, like Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos and stuff like that, they are now exposed to climate change. But if they would not have been exposed to climate change, then these people would live a very primitive life, but they would have food to eat and a roof over the head every day, no problem. And of course, they need healthcare and stuff like that, and education. But that is the bioeconomy. That's basically the low input farming that you find all over the world. And we should, I think, if you want to reduce like say, if you are in a quandary about how to free the young people from their useless consumer lifestyles where they are glued to their mobile phone all day, then the question is not attack the man, attack the bank, and be angry at the bank or be angry at the landlords or the big companies. That's not the solution, because that basically they are the problem. They are not the solution. So the solution is to create a basis for existence again, to rekindle the resources that you need to survive. And that's almost like, it feels very alien because it's really accentuated, especially of course in the consumer economy. In the consumer economy, you're supposed to be on a roll and drive around in your SUV and wear Rolexes and go to hotels and fly around the world and be in casinos and do all the stuff that makes you spend as much money as possible. And you have a huge house that you don't need, etc. All the things that you don't need, but that make you poor as fast as possible. That is what the banks want, and so that is what they teach you. What they should teach you, of course, is to spend as little as money as possible, and if you spend it on something that is generative, so that grows. That is, in the US, it's made impossible. The intensive farming lobby is of course looking at its own profit and then trying to declare any other farming activity, any other growing of calories, like consumable food, by anybody else as an infringement on their profit. So Monsanto, when it existed, I think it doesn't exist anymore, but Syngenta, the other genetically modifying companies, they would just take all kinds of varieties that were grown by farmers also in Holland and declare them their own genetic alternatives. They will make it impossible for small farms to exist. They will discourage, traditional farming markets, which is the backbone of existence in Asian countries. And I include a picture but there's many images you can find of like how people there in the region just bring food to the market and then trade it, and the currency is like worth almost nothing, but it doesn't matter because they can eat and drink. That's the most important. So we should, I think, long story short, we should be aware that if you don't have a bioeconomy, so if you don't have a place to cheaply buy food, then you run a high risk because your supermarket might be empty. There might be a fuel crisis, so there's no logistics. And if you try to grow on that land that has been used intensively, then you have to wait about 5 years before something grows on it. I wrote about that almost 10 years ago already, that if there would be a huge fuel crisis, then there will be an enormous famine in the world because the land just doesn't yield any food because it's dead because of the fertilizer. And that's the bioeconomy. So you have the fossil economy, which is the problem, the robo-economy, which is the solution, the bioeconomy that is the backup for people that want to have existential security. I think especially young people should think, hey, why is that land not used to grow food for me? Why is it grass and not used by anybody? Why can't I eat of that land? I'm born on this soil. This is my land. Why does the bank own it and not use it? What kind of bank is that? Oh, it's a bank that tries to maximize the prices of intensively farmed agricultural products and try to limit my freedom so that I have to be a consumer. It's all pushing for profit, and that's just like if individuals try to gain a little advantage and have an idea of doing something better, that's one thing. And of course, if you do it with renewables, then there's no real pressure behind it. So you can just improve things slowly. And that is how things have improved over the centuries. But with fossil energy and credit created by banks, there are, let's say, the speed at which it happens is huge, and the greed that it promotes in people means that you get a dominating economic system that tries to restrict your freedom. And then at the bottom of the list is the extra economy, which is a thing that we need to solve the climate crisis. And that is like a short-term fix for the fossil economy. And that is just to say that there are zones in the world where you cannot seek profit at all, where you cannot get resources at all. Nobody. So you can do things there. You can spend money on the growing trees there, or you can, if it's at sea, you can grow seaweed there, and you can live there, etc. but there's not going to go any money out of it, any resources out of it to the wider economy. It's off limits for banks, basically. That's the whole key essence. The problem right now is that because energy power plants are burning wood, like say, resources that are now in nature reserves suddenly become valuable and generate cash flow for banks, which means that banks are interested in it and they are going to use them, and they are just shipping the trees into the power plants and they're burning the trees, and the carbon storage is negated. And that you will have with anything. If you try to protect nature and you say, well, this is a nature reserve, and we have let's say we keep 10% of the nature reserve will be untouched, and the rest, of course, will be cut by bank-funded operators that just cut trees and then sell them and burn them and stuff like that. The only thing that you're saying then, as long as it's an economic zone, as long as it's not extra economic, is that little part of the forest that you reserved will be the last part that you cut down. That's all it means. That's like Israel and Gaza. Israel says, okay, so now we'll declare Rafah the refuge for the Gazans and the rest will be Israel. Well, that just means that at a later point, Rafah would be occupied by Israel. So that's a salami technique that the economy always uses, because there is no limit, there's no break on the economy. There is always something that people can profit of, because that's the only thing that they think of. They only think of profit, and when the dodo is gone or whatever they are catching is gone, the whale is gone, and whatever, the big tuna is gone, and all these things are gone that they have cut down. So the Brazilian rainforest is gone and everything is, then okay, so that's not on the radar anymore. They'll move on to the next thing. So there's patches of ocean that there's no fish anymore. There's only jellyfish. Well, then we'll catch jellyfish. The economy, the fossil economy, does not care. That is why it's so extremely dangerous. And that is why you should have extra economic zones. And they can be anywhere, but of course the logical place for extra economic zones is the empty quarters of the world. And you just say, well, the economy has always preferred to keep the lines of fossil fuel logistics as short as possible. So that's why you have cities, and that's why you have, let's say, urbanized areas, and then you have remote areas where it's more expensive to bring the energy, the fossil energy. That's of course changing, because the remote areas can have renewable energy, and then they're not really remote anymore, and you can exist there and you can survive there, and there's no reason to be in the city. Modern city really like, and it's, everybody says it, modern cities really fail because they're not made for humans. They're made for speculative profit of the building of large concrete structures, because they serve the banks, because the whole economy serves the banks. But anyway, that's, you cannot say that often enough. The only reason why things happen in our current economy is to maximize the cash flow of banks. Has nothing to do with humans. So if you want to change something, then you have to try to minimize the cash flow of banks. Still achieve your objective, of course, whatever you want, but minimize the cash flow of banks. So that's like, Britain allows more people to eat on terraces. That's increasing the cash flow of banks. What would be the opposite? Well, Britain allows, let's say, tax-free terraces where people just can sit outside and enjoy the sunshine on the street, and even drink their own drinks and eat their own food. That would reduce the cash flow of banks. Of course, using renewables for anything reduces the cash flow of banks. That's why you should do it. But these are the 4 economies that I think are good to keep in the back of your mind. It's like the bioeconomy. If you don't have it, if you don't see it, if you don't see people sell small amounts of food, or you don't have organic farmers in your region, something is terribly wrong. You have to fix that. The robo-economy, if you want to support it, just make sure that more renewables are built, even if you don't like it. If it's wind farms that you find are ugly and noisy, just promote it, because it will make your stuff that you have to buy cheaper, because there's more energy to make it, so everything becomes cheaper. And the fossil economy, well, it's the maximizing cash flow. You shouldn't do it. So profit should be limited. You should not try to help big companies grow larger. You should help small companies reach a reasonable size. And I think a good principle would be to say, well, any company that is located headquarters more than 100 kilometers, or let's say 100 miles from my home, I don't care about it. I don't support it. I don't buy anything from it. If I have the option, if for my existence and well-being I can choose, then I choose something that is more local. That also creates jobs, because then you're basically unraveling a logistics chain which is highly automated, and that I think is a good thing, because then there's more people with a fulfilling life. And the extra economy is like, okay, that's a very hard one to get established legally, to have a nation say, well, okay, you can do anything in that region, but you cannot export anything out of it to the world for trade. So whatever you do in there has to be self-sustaining, and of course robo-economic, so only renewable powered. And you can invest in a region that is extra economic, so you can decide as a Richard Branson or a Elon Musk or some kind of rich person, Jeff Bezos, to invest in a region in the desert and do stuff there that is good to reduce carbon dioxide, or that sustains people that want to live there. So if you live there and you operate these installations or whatever happens there, then you sustain yourself. That's fine. But you cannot export to the wider world. There cannot be a global trade based on whatever you make, because then the economy will pillage it and will use it up until there's nothing left. Anyway, this is the 4 economies, and I hope you find it interesting. Thanks for listening.